right, thank you very much for making the time. I want you to come with me on this particular journey right here on this amazing show, which actually comes your way each and every Wednesday. It is the 28th of the month of August 2024. It's quickly running, and I don't know up to where, but you know what? The show must go on. We scale the heights each and every Wednesday just to be able to try and make sense of some of the conversations that are actually going on out there. But of course, we would like to be able to bring in some of those who probably have what it takes to be able to share their thoughts on this kind of conversations. Tonight on the program, we are going to shine a spotlight on a conversation that has been making headwinds across different platforms. I know if you go and search Rwanda IP law on Google search, you will be able to see that there's been reporting around this particular issue from different platforms. I can see right there, Rwanda modernizes IP legislation with wide-ranging law. And there's another one right here. 6 days ago, Minister Umutoni sheds light on new IP law amid artists' concerns. And then there was another one here that was talking about Rwanda's creative industry divided over new IP law, and the demand for revision, or the demand for revision is growing. And of course, there's another one here that was talking about the aspect of looking at how to probably make this particular law more modernized in that particular sense. And so tonight on the program, we want to make sense of this IP law. All the questions that you have, I want you to come closer, load your airtime. I hope you've been able to charge your tweeting device or the device that you use for getting in touch with us or getting in conversational, because we are live across different platforms, including YouTube. It is right here. So feel free to join us right there on the comment section. Leave a comment right there. I'll be able to sample that in the course of the program. Also, use the hashtag #TheSummitRW. This particular hashtag is the one that will be following throughout the program, and it will be able to help us to be able to track those particular comments that you'll be bringing up, like Ange Robert right there has been using that particular hashtag really, really well. We are definitely right now in session. Already some of you have been giving feedback or sharing your thoughts, and already I have Amos Seromba, who had initially sent in a post concerning this particular topic, and he was saying, where have you been, Anangwe? I've been right here. This will be a coconut. I don't know what that means though. And he says, I can't wait to watch. I know we're in session. I'm hoping that you're watching. Another one right here from Varinyoza. Varinyons. Thank you so much for this comment right here. You say, dear artists, you should be the first to watch this show, and you can intervene with your ideas through, your mate, Dr. Tom Close. Tag the artists you know right here. This is actually the tweet right there. I want you to get conversational and, of course, be able to talk to us right here on this particular program. Engage with us. We're ready to roll this particular session right here. I want to introduce my panelists, who I'm sure some of you have seen on the social platforms, but let me do the honors of introducing them right here. One more time, making a comeback on the summit is the Minister of State for Youth and Arts, Sandrine Mutoni. Thank you for making time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Also for us, making a return, but in a new capacity, congratulations, Antoine Kajangwe.
Thank you very much.
The PS Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you very much.
Also with us is Samuel Sangwa, Regional Director for Africa, CSAC. Thank you for making time.
My pleasure.
And making the first appearance on the summit, Dr. Thomas Muyombo. We know him as Tom Close. He's a recording artist and a professional physician. Thank you for making time.
Thank you so much.
I want us to start this conversation, first of all, from what we've been able to see on the ground. Honorable Minister of State, I want to start with you because on this, there's a day, I just want to be able to look at it right here. You did put out a post that was very interesting, because I felt that it was very important for us to be able to talk about it right here. You did mention that the Rwandan artists should not worry about the intellectual property law. And I'll quote what you tweeted, 8:40 in the morning on the 22nd of August. You said, to our creatives, the recent laws will not take away your intellectual property rights over works you lawfully created.
That's correct.
What was the basis of this post? Who was it particularly addressing? And what was the actual concern when you said, let me get my posting gadget and put this out there to just set the record straight. Who are you targeting? What was in your mind?
So the message was really going to the community out there of the creative, because the day before, and I would say actually like about a week before, many questions were coming our way about the new IP law. Some people were not familiar with the previous law that came out in 2009. So people felt like something had been added that was unfair to the artist or the creative community in general. So at the ministry, we felt like it was very important for us to set the record straight and reassure the creative community that no laws presented in Rwanda are meant to take away the rights of the Rwandan citizens. That is not our purpose as a government, and that is never what we'll be standing for. So it was important to explain a little bit, because what had happened, and that tends to happen a lot on social media, someone reads one text, presents it, and then everybody else jumps on it, and there was a bit of panic around it. So I believe that it was very important to explain that that one article that everybody was referring to was actually part of a bigger, IP law that was explaining that in some extreme cases, very specific with very strong exceptions, it would be possible to use it in a certain way. But then the article, like a few lines down, was actually saying that, but in no way is that law meant to take over the rights of the person who created the piece, or is it meant to prejudice the use of IP law internationally? So it was very important to explain that that one specific article is actually part of an international conventions that Rwanda has signed up for, which makes it mandatory for us to align with other conventions around the world. And again, I believe it is very important to refer to Article 304, if I remember correctly, that says that in no way is that one article everybody was referring to meant to take away, the right of the artist, or is meant to be used in a way that would actually reverse everything that the country has been fighting for in terms of IP protection.
Right. I want to just jump the stage and go to Dr. Tom, just to be able to just set the record straight. You actually did put your voice out there in public, specifically on this particular clause or article that most people, as the Honorable Status says, that was talking about the use of the works of local artists without pay and at free will by government institutions or by government. I want to hear from you. Since that time that you did put that out, has there been any further clarity, or you still stand your ground on that statement that you made?
Actually, as the Honorable Minister mentioned, when I put out my tweet, I was referring to a snippet of a conversation by someone was quoting the IP law, saying that it was taking away some rights. And my tweet was that if what this person is saying is right, then it shouldn't be something that we should just accept. It's something that we should reconsider, because if at all someone creates a piece of work, they should have the final say on whom to give the rights to use it, either for free or at a cost, maybe at a discounted cost, or so that's what my tweet was all about. And I think it prompted some reactions. A few people who had gone through the law made some, I might call it a summary, referring to what the reactions were about and what the law really says. And it brought out some, it took away some confusion. And I think I also made a follow-up tweet saying that, referring to what the people who had taken their time, because I also took my time to go through the law, I say that I don't think the reactions that followed, that preceded my tweet, or the reactions of my other fellow artists were, even though I can't say they were far-fetched, because if someone is trying to protect their work, not in a bad, without any bad intention, I think they should be listened to and maybe given a few clarifications so that they can understand. The other thing is that when I took my time to go through the law, it says so much about different kinds of work that are protected. But the specific one that artists were talking about was when it's permitted to use, in this case, they were saying music or something that is played in public without maybe seeking permission or having to pay. So we've been having this kind of situation all along. Many people have made a lot of fortune out of people's work. So we fear that this time now, because there is no limits to when, to which events, so people feared that in some situations, some institutions
might abuse that.
Might abuse that particular article to use their works without having to pay. So that was the worry. But when people who've taken their time to go through the law gave their opinion, it also directed us to go through those specific articles to be able to understand what the law really says.
Right. So maybe without being diplomatic, you feel like everything is good. You're okay? There's no confusion as what we've seen written there that artists are divided.
I feel that so far so good.
So far so good.
Because after all, from where we've come from to up to where we are, I don't believe artists have profited enough from their works. So if this law can at least be utilized, I think it can be a good stepping stone to build from. Maybe some amendments can be done in the future, but to improve on what the law provides for.
Right. I'm going to skip Sangwan. Let me just first of all get to hear from PS Kajangwe, especially from the intent of this. First of all, it started from a policy paper, then goes to Parliament. Whatever is done, and then it goes and gets into now law. What was the intention? I know you've done a lot of extensive work on these kind of things. What was the intention? And do you feel that that is being lost, that is being diluted by maybe some people just speaking what they want and interpreting it in their own way and then, spoiling the whole intention of this?
Sure. Thank you very much, Anangwe. I think, first of all, this type of debate, this type of discourse is very positive. It's very constructive. In fact, I think many of us in the sector are very encouraged to be having this type of conversation and to see how engaged artists are about their rights. It shows that they're very proactive about what they're doing and holding government accountable for the protection of their hard-earned time and efforts, and we need to be able to communicate this as effectively as possible. The Minister has touched on it in that the drafting of this law, yes, it's gone through very extensive process. There's a policy that's stipulated and that requested that we update our law. The previous law that we had was from 2009, so it had been quite a bit of time. It required us to update it, and there's a number of provisions that we've updated. But even more so than that, we needed to align with international conventions and international treaties with regards to IP. And this particular, or these types of provisions are aligned with international agreements for which Rwanda is a member. So this is also not a new provision. It's one that had appeared in our previous law, but it's one that we needed to clarify in terms of what it actually meant and why is it that we even sign these international conventions that provide for this type of free use of work, and how do we ensure that the public is well communicated about it. So in terms of the intention, one, it's about how do we balance the rights of an author with the rights of the public to be able to access to be able to access information, to be able to access knowledge. So there is this balance that we need to craft, and it's a fine balance because we want to ensure, as the Minister has rightly pointed out, that artists get their economic rights out of what they do. But at the same time, as government, we want to ensure that everybody who should and can access works does so. And really here we're looking at people who are economically disadvantaged, for instance. So we want to ensure that, you know, regardless of your economic status, you're able to access certain works. But also, for instance, one of the proposed and the new provisions is access to free work for people who are blind, visually impaired, or print disabled. And this was a new treaty that Rwanda had signed. And again, really to ensure that there is inclusivity and access to information and knowledge and really works as much as possible. Now, I should preface this by saying, as much as we provide for free use of works, the standard is very high in terms of who and how this use of work is provided for. It's done for special cases, very special cases, and the law requires us to outline what those special cases are, right? Through ministerial orders and other guidelines that the government will document at some point, and in collaboration with the Association of Artists. What are those special cases? So
the CMOs should be able to play a role in also guiding on these special cases.
Absolutely. And we intend to work with them to outline what those special cases are. Of course, the law is there, but there's other documents and legal instruments that allow for the law to be implemented. And so setting those limitations is going to be very critical for us to outline what do we mean by special cases? For instance, if we take a good example, during the recent inauguration, we saw a lot of artists performing, even during the campaign, the election campaign, and they were rewarded for their works. And so government wants to put forward artists, their contribution to society and to the public, and we want to ensure that they're part of the economic development of the country. So there's many reasons why and many intentions. I mean, if we're talking about even public discourse, suppose you're in a forum and you want to quote maybe a song from Tom Close, for instance, or you want to quote you know, a point raised in a book by an artist. You want to do that through that discourse. If you're in Parliament, through the legislative process, and you want to make reference to a specific document that has been made. So you should be able to use those works, and that's what we mean by this. But I think it requires us to clarify further what these special cases are and what they are. And so we very much intend to do that as we continue the implementation of this law.
Right. Samuel, I want to hear your thoughts, because you've done extensive work. Even today, you told me you are actually going to be working around the issues of this kind of conversation in other forums. What are you hearing, especially from the time that, you know, the promulgation of this particular law to the process that people are now starting to consume it and starting to understand it, some either misunderstanding it? What are you hearing, and what then should be our point of departure in setting the record straight and ensuring that it works for the purpose that it was actually intended to?
Yes, what I'm hearing is concern from the creative, and I think that's a genuine concern, and this was put by Honorable Minister. It's healthy that they can voice their concern, and this happens with any law, basically, because you need to comprehend, to understand what are the implications. And here we are in this situation, as the PS said, where we need to see how we balance public interest and private interest, which is intellectual property. And I think the law is quite clear. The intent is to protect intellectual property. And the starting point is creative are entitled to have exclusive rights on their work. Basically, it means they are the only one to authorize the use, the exploitation, different
regardless of who, which institution.
That's the starting point. And the thing. And for me, the law has really been quite extensive on that. And to put the subject matter in perspective, compared to the law from 2009, this one has really, really went far. specifically to reflect new type of exploitation, what you call digital exploitation. Very, very important to note that. And this is Rwanda reflecting the current development in terms of the creative industry. We need to protect the infringement. We need to protect creative within that aspect. Nevertheless, you need now to see how do we strike the balance between what is considered as exclusive rights and public interest, and when can we at some point, and I'm really happy the PA saying specific cases for the aim of public interest, we can have this exception, because within the provision of the law, this comes as exception. We call them exception and limitation. You have the principle, which is exclusivity. Artists have full control, and the policymaker or the public say for specific reason. And I think for me, that's where we need to have this conversation ongoing, because probably that's where we have the disconnect in understanding that, and as Dr. Sam said. So I believe this is my work. I have full control how the state can come in. And then we need to have this conversation. What are these specific cases? At the end of the day, a law needs to create certainty. Just to
there has to be clarity as well.
Clarity, certainty. When I say certainty is, I invest, I'm sure I'm going to re-up. I'm going to have to recoup my investment. If I have a perception at some point that something may come between me and the output of my investment, then I become concerned. And I think that's what we've been hearing. Yes. So I think it's a healthy conversation happening. And I think the PS has said this is extensive work on this piece of legislation, and need to unpack it. You know, there is a rationale behind. The PS has said it. I think this is the best ever piece of legislation when it comes to people living with disability, like impaired people. This is alignment with the Marrakech Treaty, which is really, really good, because it makes us an inclusive society. Very, very important. This we need to recognize. So I think we should not water down the all legislation because there are few provision. I think this is a momentum for us to discuss about those and to have this understanding and say we are stakeholders in this. And I'm saying it from the international perspective. Laws create such kind of debate. It's very healthy. The very question about use of work into the education, because this is one of the provision which created. It exists. We call it fair use. You know, for the sake of education, can we use protected work at some point? So this, again, it's a discussion we need to have, and I think this is a very healthy discussion as a nation.
Right. Interesting. Honourable Minister of State, do you feel there's been a dropping of the ball somehow in the aspect of, you know, disseminating the information proper to avoid what we are seeing now in terms of the miscommunication? Dr. Tom now says, I have better understanding, which I didn't have initially, and I've clarified that I think this is a very good legislation that I think will take us far as people within the creative space. What is being done from within the corridors of the docket that you hold to fix this? Because with misinformation, there's room to water down the whole. Yes.
I think even beyond the room for misinterpretation, there is also room for abuse.
Yes.
And in one of the messages that I had to put out was to say that as this law is not meant to take over or take away the rights of the creatives, it was also a strong message to anybody who could use that one article to now think it's free for all. So it's very important to clarify a number of things, and we do have actually in the coming weeks, actually the coming days, a series of consultation meetings with different members of the creative community to again explain to them, you have your rights. The law of Rwanda protects your IP. We believe that as members of the creative economy, which has now been put at an even higher level with arts being a standalone portfolio in one ministry, it would be counterproductive to put arts at the forefront of a ministry and then at the same time do something in the background. Exactly. So it's a strong message to anybody who want to continue taking advantage, not paying the royalties or refusing to actually be accountable to how they're supposed to pay, because they're revenues that major institutions are actually supposed to pay to to IP offices, and that's something that is done around the world. It's not just Rwanda that is required to do so. So it's important for us to now, with this open debate that we have, is to now push those big institutions, or I want to say like the hotels, the conference venues, the bars, the restaurants, to say, but this law actually also provides for the collection mechanism. If you are going to be playing music, that's just one example among the different art forms that we have in Rwanda. If you're going to be playing music all day, all year, there should be an amount, and it's a flat fee. In some countries, it's actually calculated on the basis of a percentage. You need to give back, because you're not going to reach out to Tom Close at the end of the month and say, hey, I played your song 5 times. Yeah. Exactly. So there are actually institutions in place in charge of collecting that amount, and then at the end of the year, pay back the royalties to the artists. And something that Samuel Sango actually shared with us that we were not aware of, he called it the creative brain drain. Artists who are not perceiving the royalties in Rwanda register in other countries, which means we now have other countries perceiving royalties for Rwandan products, because artists have purposefully chosen to go register somewhere else.
Because there they will earn.
They will earn.
Not here.
Exactly. So this is a conversation that we'll be doing, of course, with the creative community, but also with other members of the sector, of course, with the support of Minicom, to reach out to even people who are involved in event planning. So just one example, if we are going to be receiving all these major international conferences, there should be in the package an element of paying the royalties, because they'll be playing music. Whether they like it or not, there'll be music being played. Maybe
how far is that from implementation? Because we have so many conferences coming. And tomorrow, I'm sure there's a conference coming up. How soon?
So hopefully we can use this momentum to actually fast forward this conversation, because the law was just signed like less than a month ago. And as signatories to all these international conventions, actually demand that we abide by these international laws. So it's not like having to present a whole new idea. These already exist. It's just a matter of working on the mindset and explaining to these business owners, for example, that we are not coming to collect 1 million every week. It's not that big of an amount. It's always very fair, because we look at the size of the establishment, the traffic in that establishment, and then we also agree, if you're going to be playing music like around the clock, like some businesses do, versus the one who plays it, occasionally. Again, the fee will be based on the frequency. And what this actually re-injects back into the economy is that now artists won't always have to rely just on the concert to make money. Now it becomes something that is recurrent, and we know again at the end of the year there's an amount that goes back to the artist for any product that they have put out in the community. And again, this also injects money back into our system, because that amount is taxable. So all these ideas that we have been sharing among different institutions for the past few years, we believe that this momentum is very important for us.
And it's time to now put them into action.
Exactly. Exactly.
Tom, you've been in the industry for as long as I can say. I remember coming to Rwanda in 2008. And we were buddies, we were best of friends. I don't know what happened to my music. You are to hold my hand, and we could be now performing together. But let me ask you this. What beef do you have, or what issue do you have with those who are supposed to collect on your behalf? Because you cannot collect. And the laws can be good, but the enforcement is always the problem. On this specific show, I was hosting one of the representatives of a CMO that is collecting on your behalf. And for me personally, as a host of this show, I wasn't impressed by what I was hearing in terms of the challenges that he says. It's difficult to collect. There's no, people are not complying, hotels are not. And when I hear that, I'm worried for people like you and others who rely probably on music for their livelihood or creativity. What's the biggest issue that you have, especially now when it comes to this law and what it says on enforcement?
Actually, I think the biggest challenge we had was involvement, having to maybe talk to the people you're going to advocate for before you begin advocacy. We also learned of the people who were collecting our royalties through media. We didn't know they existed. We didn't know their terms of reference, what
are they basing on to give you your money?
And when we learned about what they were doing, they were already having fights with some media houses who were not willing to pay, who were also saying they are going to actually stop playing our music, which is one of the ways most of the artists promote their music. So it was taking us into a conflict of interest that we had not foreseen. And then, like I said, we never knew who these people were, even though the government, some of the institutions knew who these people were, but we, the beneficiaries, had not been engaged to discuss with them, to know exactly what they were going to do for us, how they were going to share what they collected from the end users of our products. So it was basically lack of engagement at the beginning of everything.
If I could just touch on this, because I think this is an important part of this discussion. One of the biggest challenges, and indeed I think the conversation was right, the current CMO, Collective Management Organization, that was mandated to collect royalties on behalf of artists was hamstrung by how it was structured. It was a private entity. The regulation for a private entity to enforce is very difficult, right? To go and tell a hotel or a media house, you have to pay this amount of money. If they don't pay, then it's difficult for them to have any recourse for that. So what this law actually proposes, and this is one of the fundamental changes that is being brought forward, is to say, let those functions come back to government for the time being. Indeed, in different countries, there's either private organizations or public organizations. We've tried the private angle. It has some challenges. So we want to now see how will the public sector help to address this issue. So we want to take ownership of that, bring it back in-house through different institution, and collect those royalties on behalf of the artists.
So as you speak right now, has that CMO been disbanded? Is it still collecting?
So we are in the process of that. We've just, as the Honourable Minister mentioned, the law has just been enacted about a month ago. And so now is really when we're starting the implementation phase. And so that requires us to now start looking at how do we structure this organization. We have great ideas in terms of what we think it should do in mandating and obligating artists to join it, because not artists were also a member of this organization, either because they didn't know about it or because of, maybe not wanting to share resources and things like this. But even institutions that should be paying royalties, they were also holding back and saying, maybe we have a bit of a leverage here. So as government coming in to enforce, we're able to have a bit more of a say in terms of how this enforcement can happen. And I think this is really the revolutionary aspect of this law, amongst many other provisions that we've pointed out. So I wanted to provide that clarity and that reassurance that with this new approach, in collaboration with Moya, Ministry of Youth and Arts, RDB, and other institutions, we're going to revamp how this organization has been working and ensure that artists are getting their fair share of what they've been producing.
Honourable Minister of State, I had this on this show that this CMO was collecting even royalties for Beyonce and Jay-Z, and it was difficult for them to collect for local artists here. I was perturbed.
It does not make sense.
And I want to hear from you, because there's a need to actually create a sense of trust again, because like Dr. Tom says, we didn't know even these people existed. They actually even made us have fights which we didn't even know we were part of, with media houses that were trying to even support the work that we do. What then are the actionable steps that are being taken as we speak, much as PS Antoine says, from where you sit? You represent these people who are as part of what they rely on for their livelihood, and they cry to you and they rely on you and they say, hey, this is happening to us. What would you be promising the country tonight as far as this issue is concerned? Because not all the artists are aware of even what we're talking about right now. They're not aware of those CMOs. I know the PS says there's plans to now take back this and make it a government function. What are you telling the country tonight on this issue?
So the number one thing that we need to do from a government perspective is to maximize the current structures that we have. If I just give one example, there is the Rwanda Art Council that exists. The Rwanda Art Council is made of a number of federations. These federations are supposed to represent the interest of the artist. So we have to hold that institution accountable for its mission and its mandate, but at the same time we're also asking our artists to work together. We will still have a bit of challenge in some of the federations that we have, that people don't necessarily talk to each other, don't necessarily coordinate. And if there is one example that we have with this law, is that we're able to go further, to be even more progressive, if people work together, if people really understand that the interest of an artist is not Tom Close versus this other one. It's actually all of them coming together, being part of these federations. If federations need to be strengthened, this is something that we can work on with them as well. But it will not be sustainable if one part of that creative community is refusing to be part of the movement. So the call that we are making to the creative community right now is the same way we are reaching out to them. They should understand that they also have something to benefit from reaching out to us and not considering us as we have nothing, us versus them. So I really believe that if you take the example of all these other countries where the system of royalty is a bit more perfect than it is here, is because artists understand the importance of registering, under these CMOs. They understand that it's important to be present when these entities are calling them for meetings to discuss, for consultation. And then I believe that they also understand a little bit better the importance of sharing information. For us, it's always disheartening when we hear that we had this many artists representing federation being part of consultation meetings that Minicom was organizing a few years ago, and they didn't tell their colleagues in the community. So that also gives a bad image or a bad impression of how far is this community going to go if some people feel like it's a fight for this is my sector, I'm not going to share this with you. So it's really a call for more collective action and to really understand that we can go further together if we work together and don't consider each other as competitors. It's one nation. So
one nation. That I want to hear your thoughts, Samuel, especially on that aspect of representation for collection as we speak about this law, and how then will it be much better than the 2009 piece of legislation that we had? What can the creative industry celebrate from this particular legislation as far as that aspect is concerned, especially on enforcement?
I think the provision related to enforcement for me on the paper are really great. Even what we had in the law of 2009, you had the enforcement. Now we are going to enforce even on digital, which is very important. And I think as a legislation, it's really a model. Now, for copyright ecosystem to work, you need three elements, basically. You need the law. So now we have a law. We can still discuss about some of the provision. You need to have a copyright society, which is efficient. And then the discussion about the setup, public, private, I think something also which can be looked at. And the third and the most important one is enforcement. Tom Close, he's a creator. Now he's a doctor, but I think he's still a creator. If his music is being played on a specific radio station, he can't pop up to that radio station and say, guys,
I had my song.
I had my song. I want you to stop. Because it doesn't have the public authority. The public authority is in the hands of the state, because the state is the custodian of the law. So it's very important. So the same applies for the corporate society. The corporate society, its main mandate is to collect and distribute. But it does not have the enforcement arm. So that's why this discussion happening. We need also to bring in other stakeholders who are in charge of enforcement, actually. So how do you, for instance, prosecute an infringer, for instance? How do you engage with such kind of operators? I think for me that's also very, very important. Probably we can discuss about the corporate society. And we've been seeing it, you know. But without proper enforcement, it becomes very challenging for the corporate society to look at that. The other discussion we may need to have is copyright is a private right. And basically, we need to see how we strike the balance when the state comes in to manage private rights.
Are you worried with what Antoine mentions?
We need to be very careful, and I'm very happy we're having this discussion because it's a healthy one. As you said, we have different types of corporate societies set up. I can take the example from Africa. The two best societies in Africa. One is a public from Algeria, another one is private from South Africa. The Algeria, this is what we call the Romano-Germanic law. And South Africa, this is the common law, you know. And in the common law, the understanding is this is a business. And business with private people, because this is their property, they need. Only that the government needs to be regulating, you know. So there is a difference between regulating and managing, because collective management means actually management. So basically you are managing private right. So we'll need probably also to have that discussion. But again, for me, and I think talking business, as Honorable State Minister said, how do we transform copyright compliance as a value addition? We need people to see interest, not only individual users, but also we as a country. So as a nation, as Honorable Minister said, we're very progressive. We are clean, we are safe, and this is translated in more attractivity. So this is brand value addition for the country. So how do we also position Rwanda as a copyright-friendly country?
Right.
One of the discussions we're going to have, you said they are collecting for Beyonce and Jay-Z. Yes, we need, because not only works from Rwandan repertoire are exploited in Rwanda, but we have also international repertoire. And basically, if you listen to some of the radio, they extensively play international repertoire. So how do we make sure as a country, the signal we are sending there is your work are protected in our country, and we want you also to protect our works in your country. But basically, how do we streamline copyright compliance in a narrative? How do we make it part of what we are selling as Rwanda, as a country? Come in this country, you are protected, your works are protected. We're also telling our own young people out there, we have the best law. We are going to make sure you guys get your royalties. So I think also there is this intent, probably we need to discuss, how do we mainstream copyright, as Honorable Minister said, in conferences taking place here. It's all about music. In sports, we are building very nice infrastructure for sports. But in those infrastructure, you have audiovisual material, you have visual material, you have music. So how do we also bring copyright compliance? How do we mainstream in those industry? We can talk about hospitality industry. Any of the hotel you'll be going today, you will have your gakondo. So the hotel is making a lot of money out of that. Beers being sold. And we have fiscal revenues, because on each bottle, you have your VAT, which is going there. So how do we make sure all of this also somehow goes to the creators, at some point? So there is also a shift we need to have. The view where it's all about prohibition and like copyright, it's we are authorizing you, and how do you make business out of that? Because the business model, let me take a radio, is the content, and Tom Close said it quite well. Sometimes they will make you believe we are promoting you.
Exactly.
It's not true. Radio broadcasters need content, and the content provider is the king, as they will say. So how do we? Now, we have this situation where sometimes broadcasters are in a very strong bargaining position. That's where enforcement needs to come, because that's the role of the state, to protect those who are in a weaker bargaining position. Otherwise, it's, as you said, some players
will take advantage.
And I don't want to be very long, and that's where, and the PS said, and Honorable said, the law should not create that loophole for people to resist payment. You know, that's where we need to create those extensive conversations to make sure there's no misinterpretation, misunderstanding, to strengthen, so that those who are infringing are really, the loophole is somehow closed. So I think also there is that challenge which we need to look at.
I like the points you make, and I want to bring in Tom, Dr. Tom here, and pick up from what even the Honorable Minister of State mentioned, the aspect of unity, speaking with one voice. And this has also come up with a cross-section of the public saying, but also the artists themselves, the creators, are not speaking the same voice. They have their own internal fights. They're not able to come together and have an association that can, you know, advance their interests when it comes to now speaking on platforms where these conversations are happening. Maybe I want to hear from you. Just give us a sneak peek, even without naming anyone, you know, Dr. Tom. Just tell me, what's the issue? Is this true? Is it that you can't work together?
I think as an artist, it's meant to be that way.
It's meant to be that way?
In a way, because, you know, artists are not business people. They're just creators. But in countries where art has been commercialized, there's always institutions around artists. For example, we have people like managers, promoters. We have so many people who turn the created art into business. So maybe if we look into it in a more broader way, this IP law will provide for involvement of such kind of people into our industry. I don't believe in the US you're going to have the West Coast sitting with the East Coast on the same table to discuss
a common issue.
Maybe on the side of artists, but managers can easily come together. And when you bring together managers or labels, music labels, you can have 5 people who represent 50 artists on the table. So you don't need to have all the 50 artists come together. But once you have 5 managers or 10 managers, you easily get to each and every artist that you want to get to. So I believe there should be, of course, associations where maybe people sit and voice their concerns on the level of the artists. But when it comes to business, the good way of bringing artists together is to get to them through their managers, because these are the kind of, me as an artist, I can easily wake up in the morning and say that I'm giving rights to the public to use my music for free.
But your manager says no.
The main point of me going to the studio initially is not to make money, but to maybe address something.
Societal issues.
And then, regardless of the fact that I pay music, at one point I might feel that my biggest interest is to have my music go out as far as
it can be
to my audience. So if I have a manager, so meaning if the law protects art, so it's very easy for someone doing business to say that now art is one of the ventures that I can invest into, And when people put in their money, then they can easily sit on the table, then discuss with their artists, and convey whatever that is needed to be conveyed to the artists, because once I have an agreement with someone, I've invested in them, they easily listen to me, and I easily convince them to do what needs to be done. So at the point where we are always trying to bring artists together, but in one way or the other, many of these artists find it productive for them, artist-wide, fighting amongst themselves. You will see a beef between artists here and there, which might even get to a point where, like in the US, you see them shooting at one another. But when it comes to business, then their managers don't have those beefs. So they have business in common between themselves, so they can easily, regardless of the fact that their artists are fighting, managers can easily sit together and discuss business. So once we get to a point where many of our artists are represented through music labels, many of our artists are managed by professional people, professional business people, it will be very easy to bring them together. But saying Tom Close sit with Riderman, sit with King James, the meeting might happen at a time when this artist is coming from the studio, very tired, they can't go to that meeting. But if the manager, if the artist is in the studio, then the manager is sleeping, so they can easily go to that meeting and represent
and discuss the issues. Okay.
Can I clarify one thing? When I said artists need to also come to the same table and talk to each other, what I meant is to say that some managers do not necessarily represent the best interests of the artists. And this is across the board, by the way. I don't mean Rwanda. When you look at some of the controversial stories around celebrities around the world, you see that sometimes even their own recording company, their own managers are actually treating them as products. So what I meant to say earlier is to say that artists have more in common than the managers do. What managers do, and again, it's not an insult to the managers, they're looking at the profit, whereas the artist is there for the creative aspect, is to put out something that speaks to another human being. So what we are actually asking of our artists now in Rwanda, the crossroad that we are 30 years after the liberation of our country, is to say, what is special about the art that you are creating? Why does it resonate with so many generations around the world? And because of that very specific talent that you have, you can actually go even further if you stop relying on your managers so much. And again, I'm not saying let's get rid of the managers. I believe appropriate cultural management is key for any sector to move forward and become more professional. What I'm saying is that artists also need to have more agency in the way they are being represented, in the way laws are being presented about them. So when we ask artists to come to meetings and they send their managers instead, for us we feel like we are losing something. You know, we will want everybody to be present so the artist can also hear how the manager is defending the case, and, you know, actually again get more agency from this whole discourse.
They've got to put their hands in the cookie jar as well.
I believe so.
Right. I told you it's the shortest 1 hour. I'm already being told we need to go, and it's just getting interesting.
It's just getting started.
I'm telling you. So there's just quick feedback I'm just going to read. We have Bertha Ruagitare who says, what about artists who do not have managers? That's a quick question. And then I have Wuria Huzi Fotozi. His names are very interesting on X. He says, is there a process for IP owners to challenge the state's use of their IP? If not, at what level of transparency in the state's decision-making regarding IP use won't this discourage innovation and creativity? Just in one line as we go, probably we could respond to this. Just real quick, maybe as you close, Tom.
Yeah, I believe with this kind of IP law, it's going to provide for many people who would be willing to invest, but fail to do so in fear of losing their money. Feel that now their investment is protected.
Good.
And of course, like the Honorable Minister said, artists need to come on board, convey their feelings, especially have their voices heard. when it comes to things affecting them directly. So
Yeah.
that's why we are here.
Yeah.
And I believe so many other artists are ready to come up and
Right.
provide some inputs.
Thank you. How about you, Samuel? Just in closing, real quick.
In closing, I think basically the very essence of a legislation when it comes to copyright is to incentivize. How do we make the law incentivizing creators to create more,
Yeah.
producer to invest more? That's very important because artists tell a story with our story. So it's very important that we have the framework which enables creators to tell a story at the end of the day. Right. Otherwise, we turn ourselves into consumers because we are only consuming what is coming from abroad. That would be my first point. The second point...
Just one, because time. We don't have much time.
Yeah.
We'll leave it at that for now.
But for me, it's position Rwanda as a copyright-friendly country.
Amazing.
That would be my
PS.
Sure. And really picking up on that point, I think that's what we're intending with this law, that it's private sector driven, that it's private sector led, that it's making Rwanda an attractive business environment for IP creators, for innovators, to be able to establish here in the country and feel safe that the laws are protecting them, that they're predictable. And ultimately, we want the private sector at the forefront. We've just announced NST2, and it's putting the private sector at the forefront of our development, and that includes the artists as well.
Thank you.
This law will continue to do so.
Right. Honourable Minister, just very briefly.
So I just want to say that, as PS Tony just mentioned, we are at the start of NST2. We're putting the creative economy a bit more central in all compared to the previous NST that we had. So it is important for our ecosystem to grow even stronger. Again, calling all the artists to come together, the managers to be more friendly to the creative industries and not so much only about the profits, but also calling on the general community to realize that this is an entire ecosystem, that is not just an artist. There are the managers, we have the lawyers around them, we have the producers, again, the private sector that's also feeding it. So it's an entire cycle. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you all. It's a conversation that has to continue. It doesn't end here. And of course, we'll definitely have another installment for this to just be able to get more insights on this particular issue. I want to say thank you for watching. As always, my name is Eugene Anangwe. Goodbye for now. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I said it's the shortest one now, huh?